back to the channel. So if you've been following this channel for a while, or if you're new to the channel, I thought I'd just make a video, kind of a budget build for a 4th gen F-bodies. Now, nothing about modifying a car is budget. It's expensive modifying a car. And we're going to just assume that your 4th gen is completely stock. And this video will include both the 93 to 97 LT1 4th gen and the 98 to 2002 4th gens. So we'll say you just got one, or you already have one and it's completely stock. Now, if you've been watching this channel at all and you've seen what I've done to my car, first thing I would say is do not follow the same route that I took with my car. When I started modifying my car, I had no intentions of running the 1/4 mile. I had different things in mind, and that's why I kind of went the route that I did. But in this video, if I had it to do all over again, and 1/4 mile performance was at the top of my list, this is the route that I would take. So starting out, you want to do all the free mods, which is like a throttle body bypass would be the first one. On the 98 to 2002 airbox, there's a piece you can cut out to get more air to the intake. So that's the free mod. Okay, and another free mod you can do. Now, if you already have the tools and you have the ability to do it yourself, then it's worthwhile. But if you have to buy the tools to do it, or you have to pay someone to do it, then it's not worthwhile. But on the 98 2002, you can port the throttle body. And now I did mine, but unfortunately I did it before I ever started this channel, so I got no video of it. But I ported mine, and I also did what they call the half shaft mod, which you can find on YouTube or just do a Google search. And then another modification you can do to both cars is weight reduction. Now, on my car, I didn't want to take anything out of the car. The only weight reduction I did to this car is I removed the spare tire and the jack. But other than that, I've not removed anything else. But it really comes down to what you're going to use your car for. But there's a lot of things you can remove to remove weight, which is free, and it'll definitely help your 1/4 mile times. Now we'll start with some of the cheap modifications that I think are important, that don't necessarily add power, but they definitely make the car more consistent. And this goes for both the LT1 and the LS1 cars. First thing would be a 160-degree thermostat and a manual fan switch. They'll just make the car a lot more consistent. Now, the first modification that most people make is a cold air intake and a catback exhaust, which is fine. But if you want to get the most bang for your buck, where I would start would be a set of long tube headers. If you're living in an area where you don't have to worry about emissions tests and whatnot, I would start with long tube headers. And in my opinion, Speed Engineering is the best place to go, because they use quality materials, and they still got a pretty reasonable price. So I'd start with long tube headers. Now, the reason I'd start there instead of the catback exhaust, sure, the catback will help the sound better than just a set of headers, but the further back the restrictions are, the less effect they have on power. So I would start with long tube headers. Then after the headers, I'd probably go with the cold air intake. Now, the best one, in my opinion, is the SLP Flow Pack, which has like a kind of a ram air scoop. But if you're handy with building stuff, you can build your own scoop and save some money and just buy the lid. And I think the lids usually come with an air filter, so you can do that. After the cold air intake, then I would probably go with catback exhaust. And the two that I would pick, and these are mostly based on price, would be either the SLP Loudmouth 2, or if you want to spend just a little more money, I would get the Speed Engineering True Dual Exhaust. Anyway, after that, I would go with a set of drag radials, because even stock, these cars don't have the best traction. So you definitely want to invest in a set of drag radials if quarter-mile performance is your goal. And something I didn't mention, if you got an automatic car, this is the route to go. If you got a 6-speed car, I think the first thing you want to do is start saving your money and buy a rear end, because in order to run a fast quarter-mile time, you gotta have a good 60-foot time. Now, with these automatics, without the stall converter and a set of drag radials, you can get about a 2.0 60-foot time, which isn't bad, but it's not great either. But the rear end can handle that just fine. But now, with the 6-speed car, you're going to want to launch it hard to get a good 60-foot time, so you've got to have a stronger rear end. The little 7.5 in these cars is just way too weak to handle the 6-speed launching real hard with a set of drag radials. Now, the automatic, you can probably go a little further. Another good modification for both the LT1 and the LS1 Camaro is an underdrive pulley. I put this on my car, and I was actually surprised by the gains. I gained a little over 1/10 and a little over 1 mile per hour. Okay, so the next modification for a quarter-mile times would be a torque converter. Now, normally, I would say only buy one of the big name ones like Yank or Circle D, and I think Precision Industries. The only issue is the price is pretty high. They're usually around $1,000 to $1,200 American. Now, where I'm Canadian, by the time I got them over here, paid the difference in the money, the duty, and the tax, it would probably be real handy $2,000, if not a little more. So I started looking to see if there's any cheaper alternatives. And now, mind you, you buy the cheaper ones, you won't go as fast, but we all got budgets. So I've been looking, and I see that B&M has one that's reasonably priced, and I think it's rated 3,000 stall converter. And Summit Racing also has one. Now, mind you, they're not going to be nowhere near as efficient as like the Yank or the Circle D, but they will give you some gains. The biggest thing is what's the size. Like a lot of them B&M torque converters are like 12-inch or something like that, 12 or 13-inch. But I have found one that was 9.5. Now, I don't know what the size, I'm not an expert when it comes to torque converters, I'll admit that. But one thing I've noticed, that all the name brand, the high performance, like Yank and them guys that you get real good gains from, one thing I noticed is they all tend to be between 9.5 and 10-inch. And when you look at the cheap TCIs and the B&Ms, they're usually, I think, around 12 or 13. But they do have some that are 9.5 inch. Like I seen the Summit Racing one, they got one, it's rated for 3,000 stall, and it's 9.5 inch. And that's the one thing that all the big names have in common, is they're usually around 9.5 inch. So if you don't have the budget for the big name ones, then you could always get one of the cheaper ones, but just make sure that the size is, like I say, around 9.5 to 10.5 inch. Now, if you do have the budget for the better torque converters, instead of buying from a distributor like Summit Racing or Jegs, I would call the company itself, because you can get them custom made. Okay, so now we're getting on to little more expensive modifications, and that's the camshaft. Now, when you choose the camshaft, don't necessarily think that bigger is better. Now, this car here, I put a BTR Stage 1 cam in it. Now, if I had it to do over again, I probably would have went with the Stage 2. But when you go to pick your cam, just kind of one thing you have to keep in mind is how high do you plan to rev your engine. Now, I put a limit on mine. I don't want to rev mine past 6,400, and that's one of the reasons I chose the Stage 1, but I could have chose the Stage 2 and still made more power even with the 6,400 RPM limit. But anyway, do a lot of research when it comes to picking out your camshaft. But now, when you do the camshaft, one other modification you should make is you can get a trunnion upgrade for your stock rocker arms. And when you buy a cam, it's better to get a kit that has the cam, springs, retainers, locks, seals, and push rods. And if your car's got a lot of mileage on it, you might want to look at putting a new oil pump and new timing chain and gears on. But those are things you can get around if the car's in good shape. And now is also, depending on what you pick for a cam, you're going to have to start looking at your fuel system. Like on my car, in order to go past 6,000 RPM, I'm going to have a set of bigger injectors because I'm maxing mine out. So that's one of the things I hope to get this summer. But you also might have to look at your fuel pump too, because these cars are getting old now and the fuel pumps are getting weak. So when you do the cam, you might want to also budget for new injectors and a new fuel pump. Okay, so now that you got the cam, you got to figure out how you're going to tune it. Now, for me, I bought HP tuners, and I just from watching videos, I figured it out how to tune it myself. Now, mind you, when I got the car up and running, I had it running good, but it didn't perform as well as what I'd hoped. But over time, I just kept messing around with the tune, and I finally got it working, I think, pretty well right where it needs to be. But anyway, that's one of the things you got to look at, is how you're going to tune the car. You're going to pay someone to tune it, or you're going to tune it yourself. Then after that, after you get the cam and stuff in, the next step is going to be, now would be a good time for a set of gears. If you got an automatic, 373s are a good choice. And if you got the 6-speed, when you order your new rear end, it'd be best to order probably a set of 410s for your 6-speed car. Your intake and your cylinder heads. Now, you can buy one at a time. The place where, if you got a car with the LS6 intake on it already, then I would, myself, the way I'm going to do it, I'm going to start probably with the cylinder heads. Now, there's a lot of choices for pretty well anybody's budget. Mind you, there's nothing budget about them. They're going to be expensive, but you can get cheaper ones versus more expensive ones. And there's all kinds to choose from, and that's another area where you want to do lots of research and see what other guys are running, and see what you can actually afford, what fits your budget. Then after you got the cylinder heads, you're going to want, the next step will probably be an intake manifold. There's not a lot to choose from when you got an LS1. You got the fast intake, which is crazy expensive, but it is good. It's just crazy expensive. And there's a few other aluminum ones on the market. I don't know a lot about them. You're probably better off sticking with the fast intake. Next, you're going to want to move to get a 92mm throttle body or the 102. One thing I didn't mention was a mass air meter. And the reason being, because I don't think it's worth touching the mass air meter until you get to this point. Now, there's a few options on the market. You can buy some aftermarket mass air meters, or you can remove the mass air meter altogether and go speed density tune. Now, for me, I ported mine, and I calibrated it using HP tuners. Okay, guys, so if you made it this far, after all these modifications, your car should be able to run a high 11. Somewhere in the 11s you should be able to run with all this stuff. I know that's not super fast, like the new Camaros, they pretty much run high 11s right from the factory, but you're dealing with older cars, and like I said, this is more of a budget build. If you went with better torque converter and better cylinder heads and maybe bigger cam and whatnot, these cars will run in the 10s, but like my goal, for example, my goal is to run high 11s. Of course, once I hit that goal, who knows, maybe I'll want more. But another thing I didn't mention is along the way, you're going to have to do a little bit of suspension work, because these cars don't get the greatest traction. This car here has lower control arms. I got subframe connectors, and I got a torque arm and panhard bar on the car. And it's been hooking right now, but I don't have a torque converter in it yet either. So when it comes to the suspension part of the deal, you're going to have to, as you go along, as you start having trouble with traction, you're going to have to start doing some work on the suspension of these cars. Anyway, guys, like I said, this is more of a, there's nothing really budget about it, but it's more of the budget route. And one of the things I didn't mention is nitrous. Of course, nitrous is a fairly cheap way to go really fast. But on these stock LS1s, you got to be real careful, because I mean you can blow them up quite easily. Anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll catch you in the next one.